a lot of wars. The samurai class became fairly idle. A lot of them were getting very poor because they weren't being paid to fight. And the people who were making the most money were on the bottom of the class system. These were the merchants, because this photo and the postcard you actually see behind me, these are actually a merchant's daughter. And the samurai did not like the fact that the merchants had all this money, because they were considered the bottom of the totem pole. Because you had your merchants who didn't make anything, so they were perceived as not adding to society, because they just moved freight and product for money. Then you had your craftsmen and your farmers, and then on top of that you had your samurai. So when the samurai, who was also the ruling class at the time, because the shogun was a samurai, they saw that the merchants were getting fancier and starting to get a little bit wilder and crazier with their kimono and flaunting it. They put in place very, very strict sumptuary laws. You couldn't wear red silk if you were a merchant, if you were wearing it on the outside. You couldn't have solid red kimono. You couldn't have the gold embroidery. So if you look at these pictures, you only see a little bit of red. And her whole kimono might not have actually been red underneath. Just the strips that peek out underneath the sleeves and at the collar would have been red. Or her father's kimono, instead of having beautifully painted scenes of wild horses and cranes and samurai battles or Mount Fuji on the outside of his kimono, the merchants started saying, you know what, we've got the money for this, we're going to get this. But to make sure they don't get their heads lopped off by the samurai class, they started to hide it. And this developed into a style called ike. And ike means a very simplified form of elegance, less is more. So you'd only see maybe a flip of the undermono when you walk, when your kimono flips open. Or when he'd take his jacket off, you might see the beautifully painted scene of Mount Fuji. So it became very elegant to have things minimalized on the outside, because you always knew there was something very expensive, very well made on the inside. And then you also see in the Edo period, again, with the samurais, they're still wearing the outer layer. This is, again, the uchikake. This is a young, unmarried samurai woman of the upper class, and she's in a full formal outfit. But she would have worn something similar to this in private, if she was just hanging out with her ladies' maids or something even. And again, you see the long sleeves. This is the period when the sleeves got really long, and it was called furi sode. Furi meaning long or flowing, pardon me, and sode meant sleeve. And the reason the young unmarried ladies started wearing this furi sode with their formal kimono is when you swung your sleeves around, the legend goes you were supposed to catch the soul of the man you were going to marry in them. Once she married, she would actually cut or re-sew her sleeves shorter if she didn't put that particular kimono away from her daughter. The short sleeves on a informal kimono, anybody can wear that, you know, like a yukata or just your everyday wear. But if you start getting into more formal visiting wear, tea ceremony wear, New Year's or wedding, the unmarried women will signify that they're unmarried with the long flowing sleeves. And then also because the samurai class isn't as active in war, we see a return of the long hakama. Because a lot of the battles that the samurai were fighting at this point were politics. There was a lot of intrigue. There was a lot of going to the palace or the shogun's castle and talking to people in backroom deals. And those back rooms were all tatami mat. So the samurai warlord's ceremonial costume would have had the longer pants, so he'd have cut a more impressive figure when he walked down the aisles of the castle to go see the shogun. So you also see the samurai getting a little bit more frivolous, even though their textiles aren't as ornate as the commoners. Because again, we have the uchikake. This is also where the commoners started adopting a little bit of that samurai style. But you know, when you get something in your hand, your nose itches. So you have the red again, but this is a little bit more permissible because this is the wedding dress of a merchant's daughter. So for something she's only going to wear once, the samurais are not going to get too picky about because weddings are special occasions. Because I mean, the entire outfit is red, and that is very expensive dye. That was another one of the reasons why the merchants were wearing it and the samurai coveted it, is because it was very difficult to get the right shade of red with the dyes at the time. And then also you see on the uchikake all the festive decorations that are embroidered or painted on it. And there's bamboo leaves. Sometimes you'll see turtles because Japanese legend says they're supposed to live for 1,000 years. Anything that lives for 1,000 years is good to have around. Maybe your marriage will last. And also the cranes, for the same reason as cranes were rumored to live for thousands of years. And red in Asia in general, you'll see this mostly in China, but you can't go anywhere in Asia without seeing red used as a lucky color. But this was not something she would have worn for the temple wedding. This is something she would have worn for the family party. Because in Japan, you have two